So wonderful to have you here, Sam Keller, CEO of Working Without Borders and an Amigos alum. We'll get to hear all about his experience with both through the course of the conversation. But Sam, it's wonderful to see you again and to have you here.
It's really good to be here with you, Sarah.
Well, wonderful. We'll tell us and our alumni audience about what you're up to right now.
Yeah, I'm doing something that is essentially born of Amigos. During the pandemic, my family and I got to move to French Polynesia, and while there, I conceived of Working Without Borders, a travel company that makes it easy for families to live temporarily in amazing destinations with an extraordinary community. So now that more folks are able to work from home, work remotely, travel for longer periods of time, we enable them to experience in a really authentic, immersive, meaningful way other cultures around the world. So parents who are able to travel, say, for a month, but need to work remotely, are able to do so, and they're able to feel great about what their kids or teens are able to experience while they do so. We organize very immersive educational programming with similarly aged local youth. And we do this for, say, a dozen or 15 families at a time in these programs we run in Latin America and the Pacific.
That's amazing. I do recall the first time I saw a post about your new company on in LinkedIn, I think, and during the pandemic and during the heart of it, and was impressed, and definitely captures the spirit of what also Amigos is all about. So, what does a day in the life of being CEO of Working Without Borders look like these days?
Yeah, well, I work on both the supply and the demand side, so to speak. So on the supply side, I'm working with a colleague whose family had been with us in French Polynesia last year. She's joined my team, and she assists me to work with partners in Colombia, Peru, Mexico, and French Polynesia, Costa Rica as well. But basically to develop these programs, to design them with local partners. Another part of my day will be on the demand side, the marketing. So working with another colleague whose family had also been with us in French Polynesia last year. So with our spouses and our kids, we're all really bonded. We all lived through a pretty magical experience. We know what we want to bring to these other parts of the globe. And I'll work with her on social media and newsletters and all of that kind of stuff. And then finally, some of my day is just the operations, dealing with families who are already booked, getting folks ready for these programs.
Wonderful. That sounds like a lot of things I can relate to. And I love bringing people into the leadership of the company who have seen the magic in play, which we often do here at Amigos. So rolling back the clock and thinking about, the time we probably always remember, the first quarter of 2020, the pandemic was coming, it hadn't quite made it to the US until, really in a big way until March, of course, mid-March. But how did the pandemic, impact the way you wanted to live your life, and in turn also inspire you to start this new mission?
Yeah, well, leading up to the pandemic, literally for over 20 years, my girlfriend and then fiance and then wife, for 20 years, we wanted to live abroad. We could never figure out how to make it happen. When the pandemic set in, that's ironically when the stars aligned for us. My wife works with Airbnb. I was working for a real estate technology company, and we were able to then go remote. So we moved with our two kids to the island of Tahiti. Our kids attended the Tahiti International School right on the lagoon. You could see stingrays swimming by from the playground. And it was while there that I got the privilege, the blessing to really think about where my heart and soul was, what I really wanted to do. And we could see how the world was evolving, more people being able to work from home, work remotely, demand becoming pent up for travel and connection and community. And thus the idea was born.
Yeah. So in starting any new company or organization, there are definitely bound to be lots of challenges. What were some of the top challenges you face, especially really launching a travel company? I mean, the pandemic inspired by this new, way of working, but what were the top challenges that you faced initially in launching all this?
One was Delta and another was Omicron. Those two prominent variants. Those were not exactly helpful. So I was a bit overly optimistic in terms of how quickly we would get out of the pandemic, and those variants hindered things. But above and beyond that, finding the right local partners with the right capabilities that really share this vision, getting everything planned where we can have the right accommodations for families, where they can have sort of a village feel, planning out the kids programming and teen programming, in some locations having both kids programming and a teen program, and then figuring out how to get the word out. How to actually enable these families who can be enthralled by this idea, by this opportunity, letting them know about it. That's no easy feat.
Yeah. A lot of parallels. Yes. Delta and Omicron also for Amigos. We too were probably also very, too optimistic in terms of how quickly the world would get through all of this. It's amazing to think that technically it's our 4th program year running programming in the period of, following the onset of the pandemic. So yes, you learn how to be nimble and work very closely with local partners, which is so critical to that. So tell me about your Amigos experience. Where did you go and what did you do with Amigos?
Yeah, well, it started as it does. I've heard these stories from many others over the years. It started for me on a cold January day as I walked across the university campus, freezing my butt off, so to speak, and I saw a poster with this depiction of this tropical location and these young people working with others from another culture, and I was drawn towards it instantly. So that was back in 1992. Became involved with the Kent chapter in Ohio and trained to be a volunteer in Costa Rica in 92. Then what was called a route leader or field supervisor in Ecuador the following summer, then in Guanajuato, Mexico. Then I was the project director for Costa Rica in 1995. 1996, I was at the international office in Houston, believe it or not, as the diversity fellow. So even though I'm a white male, I came from a much lower income background, and brought sort of socioeconomic diversity in that sense. And it was and is still very much in my heart to enable Amigos to be accessible to a really broad range of young people, racially, ethnically, socioeconomically, on and on. So I did that for a while. And then years later, joined the international board. That was my most recent involvement.
Yes. And how would you say, well, it's quite an extensive history with Amigos, and I know it's hard to necessarily draw comparisons as each Amigos experience is so unique, but any kind of salient thoughts on how your Amigos experiences were different than one another?
Well, the roles made it significantly different. Being a volunteer where you're actually living with a family in some other community, in another culture, that was probably the most impactful, the quintessential Amigos experience. So immersive. You're living with another family. My gosh, that was tremendous. But then fast forwarding to getting to be a project director, where you've got your assistant project director, the staff of the field supervisors and volunteers, in the case of Costa Rica, all over the country. That was a significant leadership experience at a relatively young age. So that was very impactful. I would say those two things really stand out.
And do you have a favorite story of one of your times with Amigos, one of your programs?
Yeah, sure. One thing comes to mind, that as an Amigos volunteer, living with his family, up near the Nicaraguan border in Costa Rica, a little town called Los Chiles. Unbeknownst to me, the father was apparently sort of skeptical of how it would work, having this young American guy come to live with them, and whether this American guy would really be able to hang with him and his mates and really be able to handle it there in their community for 8 weeks. And as it turns out, when he sought to sort of test me on the very first morning, I had no problem getting on the back of those scooters, so to speak, and going out into a swampy area, meeting up with all these other guys to go fishing, where we're trudging through the mud like a swamp. These other guys have like machetes, hacking at fish, seeing big snakes. I relished it. I relished it. So there was a quick and significant paradigm shift on the part of the host father, and we quickly bonded and were tight for the whole rest of the time.
Mm-hmm. No, that's amazing. And this must have happened before our no motos rule that came into play at some point.
Yeah, this is a long time ago. This is a long time ago. It may have been before that rule.
Yeah. So, and what, Sam, I mean, for those, for our alumni that have gone through an Amigos experience, it's something that, everyone carries forward in a different way. What would you say you've carried forward from your experiences from Amigos, throughout your life?
Well, I was really bitten by the bug in the sense of not just traveling, but traveling in a way in which you really get to be welcomed into another society, another culture, another community, and you get to see your own society from a very different outside lens, and connect with fellow human beings in a beautiful, beautiful, meaningful way that you wouldn't necessarily get to do otherwise. That was so, I don't know, enriching for me. I mean, you just feel so alive, even when it's difficult, even when you're out of your comfort zone, you just feel so alive that now, fast forward all these years later, I'm getting to build Working Without Borders, which in many ways is Amigos for families. It was through that experience, all those different experiences with Amigos, including at the international office, being on the board, that gave me exposure to how you safely and competently run and build an organization that gets young people into Latin America. And I just thought, my gosh, if Amigos can do it for the young people who are traveling without their parents, we can do it for the young people with their parents and give the parents the opportunity to go along, which is, fantastic if you've got young kids, but then if you've got teenagers who may soon be leaving home and the time becomes even more fleeting and precious, then to make that possible for families. Yeah.
Well, I have one more question about Amigos, and I want to shift to talk more broadly about travel. At Amigos, and I appreciate, and when we started off, you shared, a big part of your job is getting the word out about Working Without Borders. I mean, you're now 3 years old. Is that right? Yeah. Starting at
essentially from conception.
Yep. From conception. And a big part of the effort is getting that word out. And as some people have always said, Amigos can be that best kept secret. And, I'm curious, with your background, professional background, and, why don't more people know about Amigos or, these types of opportunities? And what would you hope that they learn about it?
Yeah. In terms of why they don't know, I could be wrong about this, but my perception is that at the core of Amigos, in this culture that's been built for over 50 years, is a real focus on the programs, figuring out the destinations and the partners and the host families and the activities, and getting that done professionally and safely. And not to say that the organization doesn't have good marketing capabilities, and I've seen them strengthen over the years, but I just think that other organizations or companies might prioritize that more, branding and the buzz and the sizzle.
Right.
But I think in the DNA of Amigos, it's about planning and executing those programs. That comes to mind. But otherwise, even with all these tens of thousands of passionate alums like myself, it's still challenging, even with the tremendous word of mouth that occurs for Amigos. And I should have mentioned, I have one niece and one nephew. They've each grown up in Manhattan. They're full-on New Yorkers. In recent years, they've each done Amigos. They've been affected profoundly, just as I was decades ago. So we all spread the word, but there's a lot of folks out there, and it's hard to reach everyone unless you've got a sophisticated team and a big budget.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yes, I think our history has been certainly focused on, on running, and continues to be on really running high quality programming. And our team is avidly working to get the word out now, much more through different avenues, which is exciting. But if you don't know about the opportunity, you can't choose it, right? Amen. So that's really working to cross over that hurdle of making sure people know about the opportunity so they can make that choice for themselves. So I think just, a few questions, just thinking about travel more broadly. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on this, and I think if we all think about our lives pre-pandemic, many of us for work, would get on an airplane every month, maybe multiple times a month, and, without really a thought, it was just kind of what we did. And of course, there's the recreational side of travel and exploring the world and, learning about culture and doing all this. But how would you say travel has changed since the onset of the pandemic? And how do you hope to see it continue to change?
Since the onset of the pandemic, I see people traveling for different reasons than before, including the fact that they're able to work remotely or quote unquote work from anywhere. I see people traveling for longer durations because of that ability. So in addition to a vacation, they can plan in a bit of work as well. So some folks traveling for longer durations. And I see through our own operations and the network that we're part of, such as the Transformational Travel Council, people traveling for other reasons, in the desire to really connect with other folks, to have adventure, to travel in a way that enables them to be part of a community, to travel in ways that can be more immersive, more transformational, frankly.
Yeah. And so in your mind, what makes travel, when you're looking at travel, because you have a very specific, intent, which is fostering the ability for families and teens and their children, younger children, to be able to connect locally, build relationships, connect across cultures. And, to do that well it can be very challenging. And so in your mind, what makes this kind of immersive travel responsible? And, how do you run it well, with, making sure that it's not damaging at the local level? I mean, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, well, I think top of the list is who we work with locally. So that process of vetting different prospective local partners to find the ones that share our vision for what does it mean to have an authentic experience? What do we conceive of when we talk about visiting families, having an immersive day with local families, to where it's not voyeuristic or anything like that, but just, really authentic connection between these people from different parts of the world. Examining our own operations and the operations of the local partner to really find that we're in sync. How we'll ensure that the funds that come in reside locally. Who are we working with as other partners and vendors locally for the different activities? What are their safety practices, environmental practices? How do we avoid having hundreds of plastic bottles consumed while we're there? Things along those lines are the things we look at.
Yeah. And how might a family, looking at, because one of the things that we find, and I think for, of course, have centered on the youth, travel, immersion, and service programming, right? And you are offering this opportunity for families to go. There are clearly a lot of opportunities for families to travel in the world, whether it be through guided tours or through other opportunities. How should they distinguish between the Working Without Borders opportunity and other opportunities that might be out there for them?
Yeah, well, one differentiator for us and a real relative advantage is that we put the time and effort into it with our local partners to involve locals in the educational programming for the young people, so that when families come on our programs, as we've got on the docket for the summer in Peru, Colombia, Mexico, French Polynesia, it's not just expat kids getting to do all of these hands-on activities and field trips. There's local kids and local teens of similar ages involved equally. So that's one thing that we offer that others have not really figured out how to crack the code in that regard. We hear from families that are even traveling permanently or for a year or two doing, what's referred to as world schooling, but they talk about the challenges they experience in interacting in a meaningful way with local, and how they tend to spend most of their time with other expats. So that's a real key thing for us. And then likewise, the families who apply to go on our programs, we talk about how the extent to which we share certain core values. So the community of families who come on our trips aren't necessarily like-minded in every respect. We come from many different societies and backgrounds, but we do have certain values that we all share. So we're able to help ensure a pretty good community of families that are going along on and co-creating these month-long experiences.
No, fascinating. Yeah, I think a lot of shared alignment there around the opportunity of offering our local community members the opportunity to have this type of experience, and in their home communities or elsewhere. And Amigos has been working now for some years to really do the same thing, such that we're not an organization just of the United States, but really living up to our name of Amigos de las Americas, where yes, you have that opportunity for young people to connect and participate fully and be engaged, and in a much more multi-directional way, which is unique. So we definitely share that belief firmly, Sam. Looking specifically at, I know what is so exciting to me, and what watching your work unfold over the last few years, is the fact that you offer that opportunity for teens when they're traveling. Say, I know a lot of your program, your opportunities happen during the U.S. summer months, so families can go bring their children and provide that opportunity for those experiences to engage. And I know you've spoken to it a little bit, but if you were talking to a prospective family, what would you say to those parents about why it's so important for their children to have that kind of hands-on, immersive, cross-cultural experience? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say to them that it's going to bring more confidence. It's going to broaden the kids' horizons in terms of what they understand to be possible in the world and possible for themselves and possible for the family, that it's going to so deepen the family bonds. It's going to create these intense, lifelong positive memories. It's going to ignite new friendships, and some of which can wind up being lifelong. That there's research showing that when kids spend time in other cultures, it helps their sort of judgment and decision making, because they're able to see things from other perspectives, and that it's going to help those kids really grow to become global citizens. Yeah,
absolutely. And finally, just a question, Sam, just around the future. I think it's so fun to talk to you working with and leading and building out such a mission aligned company, offering this opportunity for families. But what makes you hopeful for the future, especially considering the type of work that you're aiming to do for families to have these opportunities?
Yeah. What makes me hopeful for the future is that despite everything we hear about how so many of us, adults and kids included, are addicted to our screens, and how young people are spending so much time on screens and interacting with each other through their screens remotely, despite all of that, I've seen firsthand the hunger and openness and interests of these young people in these very culturally immersive experiences, how it can be such that when they arrive, they seldom ask for the screens, that actually loses some of its glamour. And I've seen how kids, though perhaps intimidated at first to be in a new society and how is it going to work interacting with these other local kids, they get through that and connect in really beautiful ways, and just ultimately how it benefits both the local youth and the visiting youth. And I've seen for months thereafter how they stay in touch and what they say in terms of what have been the longer lasting effects on them. I've heard the comments for the parents. So in some ways, it's even easier interacting with some of these young folks than the parents, in the sense that, some parents can find it somewhat stressful traveling as a family and figuring out how to live in another culture, groceries and cooking and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So surprisingly and beautifully, it can even be such that the young people roll even more smoothly with the process of integrating into another part of the globe.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's the idea of learning about culture and across differences exciting to so many. I think that one thing we have to always remember is that it is challenging, right? And it challenges us deeply, and that can be very disruptive and hard, as you're making that leap. And there's going to be highs and lows and all those things. But I hadn't thought about the way that youth would, the children would also help, really be a part of facilitating that experience. So that's interesting point.
Yeah, this is something we're still trying to refine and figure out, which is that, we're going through all this work because we want these programs to be formative for the young people, and really, really enjoyable and fulfilling and meaningful and impactful for the parents too, for the whole families. And we kind of know, and there's a lot of research that backs this up, that to have that kind of effect, it can't just be easy and fun and pleasurable the whole time. There needs to be some challenge that's experienced and overcome. So communicating that and managing that with the families is an interesting aspect of all this. Yeah, wonderful. Well, Sam, it's amazing to see the Amigos spirit at work here in working without borders. So exciting to see your expansion, into different regions and expansion throughout Latin America, and to see where you're going. And I certainly can't wait to see what's next, and hopefully maybe see one of your programs and as it's in operation on a trip one day. But I really want to thank you for taking the time for an interview as an alum of Amigos, and someone who's also doing really mission aligned, incredible work right now, and just an amazing story. So can't wait to see it all as it moves ahead. Thank you so much, Sarah. And as someone who has been involved with Amigos in different ways at different times for several decades, I want to thank you for the leadership you've provided, especially during the pandemic. It's just profoundly inspiring how you and your team have navigated through this, and have pivoted as needed, and have brought this organization back to where it's now flourishing in whole new ways.
Well, thank you, Sam. Well, we look forward to collaborating on different ways as we can in the years to come. But thank you for taking the time today, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, sounds good.